the most powerful man alive, wrote a book for his eyes only. In 170 AD, the Roman Empire was the largest political structure humans had ever built. 35 million people across 3 continents. And sitting on top of it all was Marcus Aurelius, a reluctant philosopher who never wanted to be emperor. He had absolute power over an empire and almost no power over his own life. While he ruled, a pandemic swept through Rome. The Antonine Plague killed an estimated 5 million people. It may have been smallpox or measles, but the ancient world had no word for viruses, no concept of germ theory. Bodies piled in the streets. Marcus wrote his notebook during this, not after, not before, but in the middle of catastrophe. That notebook is what we now call meditations, but here is what most people miss. Marcus never titled it. He never edited it. He never published it. He never even wrote it as a book. It was a private journal, written in Greek, his second language, in fragments, at odd hours, sometimes in military tents on the Danube frontier while barbarian tribes pushed at the borders. He was writing to one person, himself. Every line was a reminder, a self-correction, a way to stay sane when everything around him was falling apart. And for 2,000 years, no one was supposed to read it, which is exactly what makes it valuable. There is no performance here, no audience to impress, just a man wrestling with his own mind in the dark. So when you read Meditations, you are reading someone's private medicine. And buried in that medicine is one rule that appears again and again, phrased differently each time, like he was trying to drill it into his own skull. It is the rule he reached for when the plague was killing his people, when his generals betrayed him, when his own body started failing. Here is the rule. When something painful happens, strip it down to its bare physical facts. Remove every adjective. Remove every interpretation. Remove the story you are telling yourself about what it means. Look only at what actually happened, as if describing it to a stranger who has no stake in the outcome. Marcus puts it like this in Book 3. He says, look at the thing itself. What is it in itself, stripped of its clothing and adornment? He uses that word deliberately. Clothing, adornment. He is saying your interpretation is decoration you draped over the event. The event itself is naked, and you keep confusing the clothing for the body. Think about how you normally react to something going wrong. Your boss sends a one-line email saying we need to talk. What actually happened? 11 words on a screen, but what your mind does with those 11 words is extraordinary. You construct a narrative. You are getting fired. You will lose the apartment. Your friends will think less of you. You will never recover. Marcus would look at this and say, none of that happened. What happened is that someone typed 11 words and pressed send. Everything else, the firing, the apartment, the shame, the future, that is clothing you draped on the event. You are reacting to the clothing, not the body. And here is where it gets interesting. Marcus is not saying do not feel things. He felt things. He buried at least 8 of his children. He grieved. He got angry. He was human. What he is saying is more precise. There are 2 events happening simultaneously, and you are failing to tell them apart. The first event is what occurred in physical reality. The second event is what occurred in your mind about what occurred. And the second event is where almost all your suffering lives, which leads to a question. Can you actually separate them? Can you feel the first event without being swallowed by the second? Marcus spent years testing this. And his conclusion, written in Book 8, is blunt. If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. Notice what he is not saying. He is not saying the external thing does not exist. He is not saying pretend it is fine. He is saying the pain has 2 components, the sensory event and the judgment, and you have fused them together so tightly that you think they are one thing. They are not. The judgment is removable. The event is not. So focus your energy where you have leverage. But here is the twist. This sounds simple, and it is simple, but simple is not the same as easy. The reason it is hard is that your brain is a meaning-making machine. It does not just perceive reality. It automatically generates stories about reality, and it does this so fast that you never catch the gap between the event and the interpretation. By the time you notice you are upset, the story has already been written. You are already reacting to the clothing. So Marcus gives himself a technique. He does not just tell himself to separate the layers. He practices doing it on small things first. A servant breaks a cup. What happened? Clay hit a stone floor and shattered. That is it. The servant did not disrespect you. The cup was not precious in some cosmic sense. It was clay. Now it is broken clay. Move on. And here is why this matters for resilience specifically. Resilience is not the ability to endure suffering. That is endurance. Resilience is the ability to keep functioning while things go wrong. And the thing that stops you from functioning is not the event. It is the cascade of interpretations that follows the event. The event is a rock. The interpretations are an avalanche. Marcus is teaching you to see the rock and not trigger the avalanche. Let me show you what happens when you do not do this. In 175 AD, one of Marcus's most trusted generals, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor. He rebelled. He gathered legions. He tried to take the throne from the man who had trusted him with command of the eastern provinces. This was the kind of betrayal that destroyed Roman emperors, literally. Most would have responded with rage, paranoia, and purges. Marcus did respond. He marched east with an army. But here is what he did not do. He did not add the narrative. He did not tell himself Cassius's betrayal meant he was a fool, or that loyalty was dead, or that everyone was against him. He stripped it down. A general rebelled. Legions are moving. I need to respond militarily. That is the event. Everything else is decoration. And then something remarkable happened. Cassius was killed by his own officers before Marcus ever reached him. The rebellion collapsed. And Marcus, instead of executing Cassius's supporters, which was standard Roman practice, burned the correspondence that named them. He destroyed the evidence. He refused to look at the list of traitors because he knew that reading it would generate a narrative, and the narrative would demand revenge, and revenge would destroy the empire he was trying to hold together. That is the rule in action, not as theory. As strategy, he controlled the input, what information he allowed into his mind, because he understood that the narrative was more dangerous than the betrayal. The betrayal was a fact. The narrative was a fire that could spread. Now think about how this applies to your life. Most of your suffering does not come from events. It comes from the story you tell yourself about the event, and then the story you tell yourself about the story. You get rejected. That is an event, someone said no. Then you tell yourself it means you are unlovable. Then you tell yourself that being unlovable means you will always be alone. Then you tell yourself that always being alone means something is fundamentally wrong with you. You have gone from a two-letter word to a crisis of identity. And none of those intermediate steps actually happened. Marcus would say, stop at the first event. Someone said no. That is a fact. The rest is architecture you built on top of it. And you can dismantle it the same way you built it, by looking at each layer and asking, is this the thing itself, or is this clothing I draped on it? Which leads to the deeper insight. The rule is not just about reducing suffering. It is about reclaiming agency. When you fuse the event with your interpretation, you become powerless because you cannot change the event, and you have told yourself the interpretation is part of the event, so you cannot change that either. You are trapped, but when you separate them, you discover something. You cannot control what happened, but you can control what it means. And meaning is where all your decisions live. This is why Marcus kept the notebook. He did not write it once and put it on a shelf. He returned to it constantly, rereading his own reminders, because the brain's default setting is to fuse event and interpretation. It takes repetition to break that default. He was essentially reprogramming himself, one entry at a time, over decades. And the evidence that it worked. He ruled for 19 years through plague, war, betrayal, and personal loss, and he never cracked. He did not become paranoid like Tiberius. He did not become deranged like Caligula. He did not become exhausted like Hadrian at the end. He stayed functional. He stayed clear. Not because he was superhuman, but because he had a technique that kept the avalanche from starting. There is a passage near the end of Meditations where he writes something that stops you cold. He says, live not as though there were 1,000 years before you. Death is hovering over you. While you are alive, while it is possible, become a good man. That is it. No philosophy, no system. Just you are going to die, so be decent while you can. The stripping down technique applied to life itself. So here is the practical takeaway. The next time something hits you, a text, a diagnosis, a conversation, a loss, do what Marcus did. Describe the event in one sentence with no adjectives. Not my boss humiliated me. Just, my boss said my report needed revision. Not my life is falling apart. Just, I received a phone call with medical results. State the facts. Hold the facts. Let the narrative try to form, and then watch it form without grabbing onto it. Because here is what Marcus discovered, and what 2,000 years of human experience has confirmed. The narrative always forms. You cannot stop it, but you do not have to grab it. You can watch it arise, recognize it as clothing, and set it down. The event remains, you remain, and you are still standing. That is resilience, not toughness, not grit, not grinding through pain with your jaw clenched. Resilience is the ability to see clearly when everything around you is designed to make you see blurry. And the clearest thing you can see is the difference between what happened and what you are telling yourself about what happened. Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, probably of the same plague that had ravaged his empire. He was 58. He never knew his private journal would survive 2 millennia. He never knew anyone would read it. He was just a man, writing to himself in the dark, trying to stay sane, trying to stay good, trying to hold an empire and his own mind together with the same simple technique. And the technique is this. Strip the event. Keep the facts. Drop the story. The story is where the suffering lives. The facts are where your freedom does. That is the rule. It is 2,000 years old, it was never meant for you, and it still works, because the brain that generates the story has not changed, and the mind that can choose to set it down has not either. Read Meditations like it was written for you, because it was.